Right. Are we on? Yeah, we're on. All right. Looks like it's 7 o'clock. We'll get started. Norma's asking about Marco. And I got a text about 4 o'clock this morning, and they were at the hospital. And she's having some contractions and things, but it wasn't the... it was a false alarm, but not false alarm, but anyway. So they went back home, and they got back home this morning. Anyway, he just kind of asked me if I could cover. It looked like I needed to cover for him, so I said, okay, I'll cover for you. So I threw something together this afternoon, and here we go. So y'all help me out. But she may be back now again, because he sent me a text at 5:19 and said they may be heading back at that time, or almost. Contractions are heavy again, so probably going to have a baby running around here in the next few days. So sounds like, or not running around, I guess. Not running around yet. Yeah. Rolling around after a little while. It don't take long. She'll be running around running Daddy's life, won't she? Won't she? Yeah. Well, what we're going to talk about tonight, again, I threw something together real quick. I didn't want to interfere with Sunday morning. I kind of want to keep that Sunday morning and this a little separate, and that's kind of how I usually do it if I'm doing both. But we're going to talk about something that I think affects all of us at some point. We're going to talk about anger. Yeah. If you get real angry talking about anger, y'all might ought to go to another class. You've had a lot of it this week? You know, it seems like some weeks hits us worse than others, doesn't it? Don't we get, I don't know, it just seems like if work's rough or the house is rough or work's rough or something, we can get angry sometimes, can't we? Oh, no. She said something about her husband not picking his shoes up. I don't know anything about that. Don't cry when you get angry. That might work sometimes, but we're going to talk about it. And when you think about anger, what's usually at the heart of it? What? Fear. Okay, that's good. What was that again? Staying calm. That's the way to combat it, isn't it? But a lot of times fear is at the heart of it, isn't it? What else can make us angry? Okay, good. We're going to talk about that. When you see an injustice, okay. If it's something you can't change, it can upset us, make us angry. If you feel mistreated, okay. Disrespected. What? Traffic. Oh man, that's the worst. Traffic just wears me out. I know it does my oldest son too, because I talked to him I think I made a mention of that the other day. I talked to him on the phone coming home from work. It sounds like me on the highway. I'm like, are you kidding me? What are you doing? You know? Exactly. No matter where you go, there's somebody in the way or about to blow your doors off, you know. So it comes about, when you think about anger, you think about frustration sometimes. You're frustrated about something. Irritation is another word to put about it, or to describe it. Now, has anger ever ruled your life? Have you ever felt like I think we all kind of go through times when we just feel like, I can't get myself calmed down, I'm just upset. And you know, we sometimes can go through stages like that, can't we? Weeks at a time, or hopefully we hadn't gone through years at a time, but I'm sure that there might be some of us in here might have gone through years at a time that we're angry about something. We're going to look at a few scriptures about how to, what it is, kind of, and combat it a little bit. One of the things, I was reading a little article, and like I said, when I was trying to come up with something to talk about tonight, this little article talked about when we get angry, this guy says it's when a hope or a dream is threatened. And that seems kind of complex in a way, but in a way it seems like that might be true. I started thinking about all the things, if somebody's threatening one of your hopes or one of your dreams, that's when we get angry, isn't it? Even if you're in traffic, my hope is I can get over in that lane right there, right? And it may be something as simple as that, right? I hope I can merge into traffic and this guy's not letting me, so therefore I get angry. But it could be something as big as big hopes and big dreams and things that we want to do are threatened. That's when we get angry. And we got to look at some things, and let's first look at James chapter 1. And we all know this. We read it many times, but we're going to look at James chapter 1. We're going to start in verse 19. It says, "You know this, my beloved brethren, but let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath, for the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God." So, if we put this into practice, we should be, what's he saying? Be real fast to do what? Listen. Be real slow to speak. And be real slow to get angry, or wrath is the way it says it. But don't we kind of do it the other way, don't we? It seems like we're real fast to get angry. We're real fast to get mad. And we're real slow about hearing, aren't we, sometimes? So the Bible teaches us that if we would just follow these simple things, that we would be much better off. Swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath. Now, in this little thing talking about anger, and we talk about hopes and dreams and things like that, there's three. This guy breaks it down into three hopes and dreams. And I don't know if I agree with all that. Well, I agree with what he's talking about. I don't know if this is all-encompassing. But three hopes and dreams are dropped into three categories. One is security. So if you think about if somebody's getting in the middle of your security, what is that talking about? It's talking about maybe your physical security, maybe your financial security, or maybe your emotional security. So that's one thing that we can get angry about. If somebody is threatening our security, and those are three different types of security. Another hope or dream has to do with our connections. Now, if somebody's threatening a connection, it's the idea of a relationship, friendships, family, something like that maybe, or your relationships that you value, that are important to you. If somebody threatens those, that's when we get angry. A third thing that hope and dream is put into a third category, and it's the idea of control. We like to be in control, don't we? Have you ever been in a position where you're out of control as far as your situation goes? Yesterday? Oh yeah, we've been in that situation before. Yeah, but if you lose control of life, you can get very angry, can't you? Has anybody ever been in a serious car accident when you've lost control of an automobile? That's a scary thing, isn't it? And it's the same way in life. When you lose control of life and what's going on, it can be very scary. And a lot of times when that happens, we get angry. And sometimes it's misplaced anger, but it occurs, doesn't it? We get angry. Now, anger, we're going to look at a verse here in a minute. What does anger tend to generate more of? More anger, doesn't it? And, you think about, scientists forever have been trying to perfect what I think the word is called a perpetual motion machine. You ever heard of that? It's a machine that they've been chasing for hundreds of years, that you start this machine running and it just keeps going and keeps going. And it's almost like it's called a perpetual motion machine. They're trying to do something like that. It's as an energy source. Well, they've never quite figured out how to do it. Yeah, there you go. God's got one going, doesn't he? What was you going to say, Matt? It's not possible because it takes more energy to keep it going. God's in charge of that, isn't He? So, but I was sitting there thinking when I was looking at this next verse. Let's look over at Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 15. And I got to thinking about it. I said, I guess probably anger is about as close to a perpetual motion machine as we got, if you want to think of it that way. But if we look at Proverbs, let me get in my phone here. Proverbs chapter 15. And of course, the Proverbs are just full of good information. Proverbs chapter 15, verse 1, it says, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." So, anger, if we want to keep something going, it's real easy to keep it going anger-wise, isn't it? If you get into a family situation and you want to you ever met somebody just likes to keep it going? Just like things will calm down a little bit, and then somebody's got to some people thrive on that, don't they? Seems like. We shouldn't be those type people. We should be the type people that are trying to turn that anger down a little bit. But it says there, that soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. It says, "The tongue of the wise uses knowledge rightly, but the mouth of fools pours forth foolishness." So, when we think about anger and we're confronted with that, how we react to it is going to determine what? Where it's going to go, right? The idea, police officers a lot of times, they try to use that word de-escalate, don't they? I've heard that term. You want to try to calm things down. You don't jump into the situation to just, make everything worse. You try to de-escalate. And when you get into situations, I know of something that happened in our family a few weeks ago, and one of the family members was getting in the middle of something, and it was kind of like they jumped in with both feet. Have you ever heard that statement? Well, I'm going to jump in the middle of this right now, and you can imagine it didn't get any better, did it? It got a lot worse. So the idea here is don't keep that motion going. Don't keep the heat going. Try to tone it down a little bit, and use those soft answers instead of harsh words. Let's look over at Ephesians chapter 4. Ephesians chapter 4, and we're going to look at verse 31. Verse 31 and 32. It says, "Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice, and be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you." So, if we were to take this advice, and the advice from the Bible is pretty good advice, isn't it? Most of the time? All the time. All the time, isn't it? So if we put away bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking, you get that stuff away from. Now, that's real easy to just read it and say, okay, that's what I'm going to do. But it's not that easy, is it? Because, again, we feel threatened sometimes. Somebody's getting in the middle of my business. Somebody's, threatening something that I like or I love, or someone or something that's mine or is important to me. And it really puts us in a bad position sometimes if we tend to be angry. But it says, "Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another." And how does he tie it back? He says, you need to forgive, and you need to put these things away from you, just like, who does he tie it back to? Christ. Is not Christ our greatest example? He's the guy we should be focusing on, looking toward. And we often just, Christ was perfect. I can't be like Christ. Well, we can't, but can we move in that direction? We need to be moving in that direction every day. If we're starting over here, as long as we're moving in the right direction, we will be better tomorrow than we were today, won't we? If we're not even trying, we're not going to make that change, are we? We've got to make the change. If we can't get along with our brothers here on this earth, how do we expect to get to heaven? How do we expect to get along, will we both make it to heaven, or either one of us make it to heaven? And that's a good point. Even if we just throw our hands up and say, I can't be perfect, I'm mad today. Well, but again, if we're making steps in the right direction, does God want us to be perfect? He would love us to be perfect, but He knows we can't be. But if we're striving to be, we're going to be better tomorrow than we were today. And we're going to be better tomorrow than we were last year, aren't we? So therefore, if we're moving, and that's what God expects us to be every day, we can't wake up tomorrow and say, oh, I'm not going to get angry today. Well, I may get angry today, but I may think about it a little more. I shouldn't be angry over that, and I need to correct that. And the next day it'll be a little, it's a little easier to sin every day sometimes. If you're how sins progress sometimes? It's a small step, and then before you know it, you're just down the path of sin. It's the same way with living the Christian life, isn't it? You may not be perfect tomorrow, but if I control my head just a little bit better tomorrow than I did yesterday, I'm a little bit better tomorrow than I am yesterday, right? So it's every step. We can be making moves in the proper direction. Now, when was the first anger that we read about in the Bible? Who? Cain. Okay. Let's turn over to Genesis. The first, and it didn't take long, did it? God made us, and He made us human beings with emotions, and our emotions control us sometimes, but we need to control our emotions, don't we? Let's look at Genesis chapter 4. And we're going to start in verse 4. We know the story, but it says, Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat, and the Lord respected Abel and his offering. But He did not respect Cain and his offering. Cain was very angry, and his countenance fell. So the Lord said to Cain, Why are you angry, and why has your countenance fallen? If you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin lies at the door, and its desire is for you, but you should rule over it. So God, speaking to Cain here, He says, Why are you mad? What was His point to Cain? He said, Why are you angry? If you do well, what are you angry about? Will you not be what? What's the word here? If you do well, will you not be what? Accepted. Cain was upset because God didn't like his sacrifice. And he obviously told Cain what kind of sacrifice he wanted, or he wouldn't have been held responsible for that sacrifice. So Cain knew what he was supposed to be doing, and he did not do it. And then he gets mad because God didn't like his sacrifice. And sometimes we do that kind of thing, don't we? We're doing something we shouldn't be doing, and we get angry if somebody calls us out on it. That's pretty common, isn't it? We don't like somebody, even though in the back of my mind I know I'm not doing right, but don't tell me about it. The thing is, your kid may be running wild, and somebody gets on to your kid when they're running wild. What do sometimes parents do? What's their knee-jerk reaction? They get mad. What are you getting on to my kid for? Right? You see that at schools and, of course, here in the church sometimes. Why are you getting on my kid? Well, you need to handle that situation, and it makes someone angry because they realize maybe I should have been taking care of that situation, and I'm not doing it.
Not all anger is a sin, but in Matthew, Jesus was saying, whoever is angry without cause is a very serious thing. If you call your brother a fool, you could be in danger of hellfire.
Yep.
And so being angry without cause is a sin. But I think in the book of Mark, where Jesus said to the people in the synagogue, is it okay to heal or to kill on the Sabbath day? And so He healed the man with the withered hand, but when Jesus looked at him, He was angry at their hardness of heart.
And that's what we're fixing to talk about. All anger is not sin, is it? Because the famous example that we always go to and is glaring in the Bible is that when we're talking about anger, who do we know of that got angry? Christ. I think you might be right. Scott's bringing up maybe God showed anger when they first ate of the tree, didn't he? And we read examples of God being angry sometimes. He was angry with the children of Israel at some points. Was he wrong in being angry for what he was angry about? No. Eve might have been angry with herself. I bet she was. And I know Adam was mad at her. No, I don't know. Yeah, he could have said no. But that's that blame game, isn't it? She did it, right? But let's look at, and when we think about, we'll just reference it though, but Christ being angry in the temple, right? Wasn't that when he really, and we were in Missouri and went to the, what's it called, Sights and Sounds Theater, I think it's called, and the show we went to see was Jesus, and it kind of took him from the Sea of Galilee when he first started meeting his apostles and things like that through his crucifixion and resurrection. And they had the scene in there with him going into the temple. And they were pretty right along with the Bible, how it went. But it was interesting to see how they portrayed Christ in the temple. He was pretty upset. And I think you read that passage and you think, oh, he turned over the tables. Well, in this play, that it probably was more like the play. In reality, he was very upset. I mean, he was turning things over and yelling at the scribes and the Pharisees and all that, and he was kind of telling them what for. And we don't every word that he said and every small action is not recorded, but I can imagine that he was very animated at what was going on there in the temple. And that is recorded in the Gospels, of course, John 2, Matthew 21, and Mark 11. They're all, that scene is recorded there, and you can read that for yourself. But, just like we're talking about, is there such a thing as what we might call righteous anger? There is, isn't there? We're going to look at that in a minute. Be angry and sin not. We're going to look at that. But when you see, I think Matt mentioned it, but when you see, sometimes we can have righteous anger when we see, of course, Christ, we would say Christ was righteous anger. He was upset at an injustice in his house, wasn't he? And we can be, I wrote down injustices. You see do you ever hear news of a child, something happened to a child on the news, and you say you're very upset about that? Or maybe some person that's poor and having problems if somebody does something to them. It's very difficult, isn't it? That's the kind of anger that you would call righteous anger, injustice. Maybe oppression from somebody. If somebody is oppressed by someone else. You think about, I think about people down on the border, there's people paying to get into this country, and then you hear about 50 of them dying in a trailer. And you think about it, that just makes you sick, doesn't it? And angry about that thing if you really pay attention to what's going on. And they were locked in a trailer and left there, and they suffocated. Can you imagine the horror of that and the anger? And I can imagine being those guys that are down there working and trying to stop that, how angry they probably get every day about what they're having to deal with down there, just trying to take care of that situation. But somebody taking advantage of somebody, that can happen on large scale and on small scale too. We can be angry at people for taking advantage of others. Let's look over at Psalms chapter 139. Now, Psalms 139 is a psalm of David. And we're going to start 139. We're going to look at 21. That's where we're going to start reading. Now, David, he, and Marco's covered a little bit of this lately, but David was he was a high-strung guy, I would expect. And he was willing to fight. If he had to fight, he would fight, wouldn't he? He never walked away from a fight. And he found times that he was very angry. And I think in this context, we're going to read it, but I think in this context, you might call David's anger what we might call a righteous anger. Let's look in verse 21, and we're going to read through 23 or maybe a little more. Do I not hate them, O Lord, who hate you? So what's David saying? I am angry, I hate. And the Bible teaches don't hate, but we're talking about here as far as an anger goes. Of course, God hates some things too, doesn't He? But we're not to hate people necessarily. But what is David's point here? I am upset, I am angry at somebody, and why do I hate them? Because they hate you. If we spend our time hating things that God hates and not fretting over the small stuff that we are so upset about, we'd be better off, wouldn't we? And David was that kind of guy. He said, I hate this because they hate you. I hate them because they hate you. It says, and do I not loathe those who rise up against you? Those that hate God, those that rise up against God. Can we not be angry and upset with those that teach false doctrine? Can we not be angry and upset with those that are leading others astray? I think we get comfortable with it sometimes, don't we? We see preachers and we see people, we see religious people teaching things that are completely contrary to the God, and we just kind of, from what the Bible says, and we just, oh well, But a little healthy dose of anger sometimes can put that back in its place, couldn't it? We should have a certain twinge of anger when we see those kind of things.
Yeah, I was going to say, we need to hate their actions, but love the people. And I think, even here in Psalms it says, I hate them with a perfect hatred. And to me, that's the idea that it conveys that the enemies of God are those that are opposed to everything that God is, His righteousness. So that implies that they're evil. And so you got to hate the evilness of that, but you got to love the people. You can try to influence them.
And you can. And there's sometimes though that people are, like you say, there are some people that are just not going to. And I don't know. I don't think God wants us to hate somebody to the point to where we write them off and say you're not worthy of my time or anything like that. But to hate what someone is doing and to get angry about that is probably something we should think about more often. We the go along to get along kind of thing, sometimes it serves us well in some points and sometimes it doesn't. I'm sure, Christ was probably the most meek person on the world, on the earth at that time. Did He not know? He knew the beginning to the end and everything in between, and knew the end of the story and all in between. And He was a very kind man, wasn't He? He was such a kind man that people came from miles around to see Him and just to talk to Him and see Him. But yet, when He came into the temple and He got mad enough, they understood what He was talking about, didn't they? They didn't say, well, I wonder if He's mad or not. Well, now you guys need to quit doing this now. Right? Don't we picture Jesus as this very meek and kind man, and He was, but there came that time to where I'm done with this, and this is my Father's house, and y'all need to get out of here. And He was upset enough about it. Scott, he had his hand up. David was upset enough that he wanted, of course, the deal is, I think he kind of put that in God's hands, didn't he? He said, okay, I want you to take care of this, God. Howard.
You see something unjust or that's poor in your eyes, and it makes you angry just to see it, but then you realize there is absolutely nothing you can do to change that in any way. You just don't have the power.
And we got to know the difference, don't we? Howard's saying, if you can't hear him, he's saying there comes a time when you see things that are going wrong that you know is wrong and you can't fix it. You can't fix it. And what sometimes we keep trying to change something and it makes us mad, and sometimes we have to realize, what is that saying what is that little prayer that I've seen printed sometimes? God, give me the strength to change the things I can change, and accept the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference. And the problem is we don't use our heads and wisdom enough to know the difference, and we spend a lot of time mad about something we can't do anything about. And then the things we can fix, we don't do anything about it. So we've got to have the wisdom to know the difference, don't we? And that's a good saying in actuality. So, but here and let's go ahead and continue. It says in verse 23, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my anxieties, and see if there's any wicked way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." That should be our prayer every day, is that if we're angry or something's going on, I hate what I need to hate, that maybe injustices and things like that, change what I can change, and God, I'm going to let you handle some of this stuff. And that's part of it. We could solve ourselves a lot of anger if we'd let God take care of some things instead of us trying to worry about it and fix it and be mad about it. God, that's a good point. God knows their heart, doesn't He? So we've got to let God handle some of that. Now, anger, as we've talked about, anger's not a sin, but anger's got to be, what's the word? What would be a good word? What do we need to do with anger? Control it, right? We got to get a noose around that thing and calm it down. Like when I was on the farm, you had the halter, the rope around the cow or whatever, and you're trying to get them in the chute, and you're running them in. You got to control that thing, don't you? A horse, you put a bit in the horse's mouth to control the horse. One thing here that I think would help us a lot on anger is that when we think about, we all know what pushes our buttons. Isn't that what they say? Well, that just pushes my buttons. Isn't that the kind of the thing we say? My kid's just pushing my buttons, or my wife or my husband's pushing my buttons. What is that button? What is that probably, what would we call that? It's like a trigger event, isn't it? And don't we all know our own personalities? There's some things that just wouldn't bother me at all, but would probably just set one of y'all just to the moon, And there's things that won't bother you that just get under my skin, right? But what are those? Those are triggers, right? That trigger us to get mad, don't they? Now, the thing is, if we know, as a practical matter, trying to do better every day, if we know what triggers us to be angry, what should we do about that? What? Avoid those triggers. If you know what pushes your buttons, now, can you always avoid those? You can't always avoid them. But there you go. That's the next thing we're going to talk about. The first thing is just try to stay away from them. Now, me in traffic, it's hard for me to stay away from traffic because I got to drive in traffic, right? So it's hard to, but what should I do if I know I'm going to go in traffic? I need to take a deep breath and say, somebody's going to cut me off today. Somebody's going to ride my tail. Start 15 minutes early and I won't be in such a hurry, right, Monty? Is that what you're trying to say? Okay. You need to mind your own business. That's a good point. I've read that somewhere too. If you know you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be tied up in traffic, get your mind on something else, like an audio book or do some texting and reading on your phone or whatever. I'm kidding. Read a book, I guess, when you're driving, right? If you're sitting and you could read a book then. You could do that. Have you ever seen anybody going down the road reading a book? I have seen, Scott, I have seen somebody going down the road reading a book, and I'm going, that is scary. But we do the same thing on our phones all day long anyway, don't we? See everybody on their phones. But the deal is, if you know you're going to be in that situation, prepare your head before you get in there, right? When you get in your car, say, okay, I know what's going to happen, and I just need to take a deep breath. And that's hard to do because we're already, I'm hustling and rustling around and fast as we can go. But avoid them if you can. You can pick when you go to work sometimes, can't you? If you're going to have to go into Dallas, can you say, you know what, I'm going to go at, and I do this a lot, I'm going to go at 10 o'clock instead of 7 or 8 o'clock, right? Because traffic's a little lighter at 10 than it is, when everybody's rushing to get to work. So you can adjust things sometimes. Now we're using traffic, but other things in your life that you could adjust, couldn't you? To avoid that trigger. Leave early, go a different route maybe when it's not so much traffic. Okay, not as much congestion and everything, right? And again, prepare your mind beforehand, right? Let's look at this particular principle. Let's go over to Proverbs real quick. And this little content, Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 3. This goes just right along what Kathy was saying. It says, a prudent man foresees evil and hides himself. That's pretty good advice, isn't it? What does prudent mean? Smart, right? If we was putting this in Leslie Thomas language, a smart guy needs to be thinking ahead. And if he knows something's going to be in his way, what should he do? He should stay away from it. So it says a smart man, a prudent man, foresees evil. He's thinking ahead instead of just stumbling. We just kind of stumble through life half the time, don't we? Oh well, do-de-do-de-do. What's going to happen today? Well, if we're intelligent and wise, we need to be thinking ahead. Okay, this is what I need to be thinking about, and therefore I'm going to prepare myself for what's going on. But first of all, I'm going to try to avoid that. I'm going to try to get away from it. So he hides from it. But the simple, who's he talking about? The simple what? Simple-minded, a simple man. Okay. The simple pass on and are punished. What was that? Inexperience. Could be just inexperience, right? Simple doesn't necessarily mean stupid, does it? It could mean stupid, but it may mean just, a lot of young people would be considered simple. Sometimes you think about, why don't you know better? Well, a lot of it's just because they just hadn't lived long enough and they learned. So that's part of it, isn't it? But the simple, it says the simple passes right on and are punished. The prudent guy says, I'm going to pay attention to what's coming up. The simple guy just headlong into whatever's going on. And what does that do? It says, and they are what? Punished. It says, but humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor in life. So, the idea is, pay attention. Don't just go headlong into whatever anything, whether it's traffic or work or, you can get upset at work pretty easy too. Is there anything happens at work that gets you upset sometimes? All the time. Something's going on at work that will get us upset. So, be prudent, be intelligent. Now we're going to look at, we've just got a few more minutes. Ephesians chapter 4. Let's look at that right quick before we finish. Ephesians chapter 4. This goes back to the idea is that we can be angry and we can do that without sinning. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 26. I think I said that wrong. Ephesians 4:26. Yep, 4 and 26. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath, nor give place to the devil. So, we can get angry, but what does it tell us? Do not sin. We can have righteous anger about things sometimes, and we don't let it get control of us and cause us to sin. A lot of times the anger leads to other things, doesn't it? Why do people kill people? Because they're angry, right? You know, if I get angry, I'm going to kill somebody. I might do that. What does anger cause us? If I want to steal something, a lot of times, sometimes it's out of, I just got to have some money. But sometimes it's about, I don't like it that person has that. I am envious of them. I hate them. So I'm going to take their stuff. Anger leads to so many problems, and anger is at the root of a lot of that stuff, isn't it? A lot of sin has anger at its root. But it says, do not let the sun go down on your wrath. What do we say about, what does that mean? What's the old saying what's that? Take care of it, right? Because what happens if we get angry with somebody and we just let it, the next day, what do we wake up? Stews, right? The stew is that slow rolling, boiling, You just stew about it, and it makes you madder and madder, doesn't it? And before you know it, you're so mad you can't even talk to them anymore. You can't even function with them anymore. And it just continues to get worse, doesn't it? So God gives us some pretty good advice here. You know what? And this is saying get angry and do not sin. But if you're getting angry, don't let the sun go down. What is the old statement about married couples? Don't go to bed mad, right? Isn't that what that advice that has been told for years? Don't go to bed mad. That's good advice, isn't it? Don't let the sun go down on your wrath. It says, nor give place to the devil. Okay. It causes more problems. Well, what you're saying reminds me of, have you ever had somebody mad at you and you didn't even know what they was mad at you about? Have you ever been mad at somebody and they didn't know what you were mad at them about? Happens all the time, don't it? And if we'd have just done what God says and said, go to that person and say, I'm upset with you about this. And they're going to go, oh, we don't know what we're mad about sometimes. But wouldn't that solve a lot of problems? If you're really mad at somebody, go to them and say, this is why I'm upset. And the thing is, I'd say 95% of the time, what happens? Well, I didn't do that on purpose. Or I didn't realize I said that. I didn't mean, you misunderstood what I said. I was saying this about something else. And there's all these misunderstandings.
The longer we stay angry, the more it festers.
It does. It gets worse and worse. And again, if we don't let that sun go down, if the sun goes down on your anger, get up the next morning and go take care of it. How's that sound? Get it. He's basically saying, take care of that. Go talk. If you're mad at somebody, let them know about it. Now, that doesn't mean, well, let me tell you what. You made me mad, I'm using Norm as an example, but, but what? If we go to somebody in the right attitude, most of the time it's just a big misunderstanding, isn't it? It's hard to go to somebody, isn't it? It's hard to go to somebody when you're mad at them, and it's hard to go to it's hard when somebody comes at you and they're mad at you. You kind of get defensive, don't we? That's right. Pride is a terrible thing sometimes. That's a good thing. Try to smooth that over. Sometimes. That's right. So it says, nor give place to the devil. So what's he saying? He says, don't let the sun go down on your anger or give place to the devil. So what's he saying? There's a natural progression there, isn't there? If you make a habit of being mad and angry, and you go to bed angry, and you let the sun go down on your anger, and you wake up the next day angry, what is he saying basically? What's that giving place to who? The devil. The devil's got you. I mean, that's just the easy way to put it. If the devil gets you mad at everybody and you're walking around mad at the world all the time, the devil's got you right where he wants you, doesn't he? And we have, sometimes we go through stages, it seems like, where we're looking for an excuse to be mad, aren't we? And if we would just get out of that mindset, be looking, as the Bible teaches, I'm not going to have time to get into all of it, but, put on the fruits of the Spirit, right? Add these, not only get away from these bad things, but add these good things. And what? You take up, there's only so many hours in the day, right? Isn't that the old saying? There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much time in the world for your day to function. And if you take 2 or 3 hours of stuff you're stewing over and you put 2 or 3 hours of good stuff in there, you've gone a long way. Yes?
Sometimes when you're angry at yourself because of something you did. And sometimes it's sudden, like if you hit your thumb with a hammer or something like that.
Yeah.
And so when I see this, be angry and sin not, sometimes you let your mouth get the better of you and things like that.
Right.
You got to be careful, when you're mad at yourself.
Even when you hit your hand with a hammer, you got to be careful. And you kick it again, huh? Stupid table. That's right. But we've got to be careful, and we got to control, and that's one of the hardest things, to control our mouth sometimes when something like that happens, doesn't it? We hit our thumb or do something like that. But the idea, we're out of time, but handle your anger correctly, and you can come out on the other side a lot stronger, can't you? If you make a habit of handling your anger correctly, it'll keep you from building it into destructive tendencies. Anger is one of the most destructive emotions that we have. And it will tear up, it tears up families, it tears up relationships, it just runs roughshod over everything that we like and we care about, and yet we let it do it to us, don't we? I think I'm over time. All right, appreciate y'all's comments today.
I hear everybody coming in.
Oh, sorry.
If you would come in and grab a seat. Hope you've had a good week. If you would take out a songbook and mark in your songbook song number 915, 915. That's going to be the song invitation following the Devo tonight. We're going to sing the first, second, and fourth verses. Actually, the first, third, and fourth verse. And then, if you would, turn your songbooks over to 709, How Sweet, How Heavenly. We'll sing all 5 verses. How sweet, how heavenly is the sight when those that love the Lord in one another's peace delight, and so fulfill the word. When each can feel his brother's sigh, and with him bear a part. When sorrow flows from eye to eye, and joy from heart to heart. When free from envy, scorn, and pride, our wishes all above, each can his brother's failings hide, and show a brother's love. When love in one delightful stream through every bosom flows, when union sweet and dear esteem in every action glows. Love is the golden chain that binds the happy souls above, and he's an heir of heaven who finds his bosom glow with love.
Good evening. Saying, have you ever thought about being too holy? You know, it'd be a good thing if we all were too holy. And that way, we can be like Enoch. God can take us. You know, you wonder why God took Enoch. The Bible says in Genesis, chapter 5, that Enoch walked with God. Now, can you imagine, you or me just having a little walk with God? Just chit-chatting as you go along. Usually what happens when you walk with somebody, sometimes they'll say something that will amaze you. Having a walk with God, could you imagine what he would say that would amaze you? Probably just walking with him would amaze you. But how would you get to be like that? To get to be holy. We want to get to be like that. And Philippians says we need to be godly. So we need to, have that godly spirit, so we can have that walk with God. And in Philippians chapter 2, it says we have to be unblameable. We have to live that righteous life. So I'm encouraging you to try to be holy. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be so holy and have that walk with God that God will take you. Now, wouldn't that be the life? So think about that one as we stand and sing.
while we do his good will. He abides with us still, and with all who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. Not a burden we bear, not a sorrow we share, but our toil he doth richly repay. Not a grief nor a loss, not a frown nor a cross. Blessed if we trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey. But we never can prove the delights of his love until all on the altar we lay. For the favor he shows and the joy he bestows are for those who will trust and obey. Trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus, but to trust and obey.
Visitors, we are glad you are here, and we ask that you please fill out the visitor side of the card on the pew in front of you. Members, please fill out the member side, and we will please pass the cards in the aisle, and the young man will come pick them up. Catherine Ussery came home from the hospital on Sunday. Barbara Williams' surgery went well. She came home yesterday. She is not ready for visitors yet, and they want to say thank you for all the food and the calls. Eddie Donald also needs our prayers as he sees his oncologist soon. Keep Maggie and Mark in your prayers. She is in labor and ready to go to the hospital. Please see the care sheets for others who need our thoughts and prayers as well. Saturday, October 8th will be National Door Knocking Day. Be at the building by 9 a.m. if you'd like to participate. This Sunday evening will be Combined Roundhouse at Crandall. The van will leave right after services. The next congregational meal will be Wednesday the 12th. The girls of the congregation will be having a fancy tea party on the 15th, starting at 10 at Patrice's house. See her for any questions. There will be Visitation Meeting on Sunday, October 16th at 4 in room 2. The list for the Thanksgiving baskets are on the booth in the foyer. Please place your items in the bin in the small foyer. Please see Molly Cannon or Donna Ritchie if you know of a family that needs a basket or wants to donate money. Remember to pick up your used communion cards and trash after services. Thank you.
Once again, it's good to see everybody here tonight, and if you're visiting with us, we sure are glad that you're here. If you would, the closing song is going to be song number 827. 827. Sweet Hour of Prayer. Remember, as we leave here this week, to spend some time in prayer as you have time. I'll sing all three verses. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, that calls me from a world of care and bids me at my Father's throne make all my wants and wishes known. In seasons of distress distress and grief. My soul has often found relief, and oft escapes the tempter's snare by thy return, sweet hour of prayer. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, the joy I feel, the bliss I share, of those whose anxious spirits burn with strong desires for thy return. With such I hasten to the place where God my Savior shows his face, and gladly take my station there, and wait for thee, sweet hour of prayer. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, thy wings shall my petition bear. To him whose truth and faithfulness engage the waiting soul to bless. And since he bids me seek his face, believe his word, and trust his grace, I'll cast on him my every care, and wait for thee, sweet hour of prayer.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so thankful to have been able to gather here tonight in your name. We're thankful for the classes that were participated in and the knowledge from your word that we've been able to gain. We ask that you bless us as we leave this place, give us safety. We'd ask that you help us to live each day closer to you. May we study more, pray more, that we might be acceptable in your sight. Be with those that are sick and unable to be here tonight, and bless them with good health. They might return to us. Be with those that are grieving at this time and the loss of loved ones. We especially be with the Beam family. We'd ask that you be with Marco and Maggie at this time, and may all things be well with them and the baby. We're thankful for them. We'd ask that you bless us now as we leave. May we always seek your ways. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
I do appreciate that lesson tonight.